Like we're not
So,
we're not with like just a small thing. We're talking about the inability to cultivate crops. We're talking about not really drinking water, but water to put on crops. We're talking about heat so exhaustive that crops produce less, which we've already seen throughout the United States. Colorado River Basin, they have to like draw a lottery over who's gonna grow crops. Hello?
I wanted you and that last guy were kind of all over the place, but you were talking about oil prices, and I wanted to get your why you think we're better as far as energy under Joe Biden.
What do you mean?
Well, everybody talks about drilling. That's not the problem that we have as far as prices.
More.
If you go back to 1980, we had over 250 refineries in this country. You know how many there are today?
Mm-hmm.
You do?
I don't know the exact amount. I do know that some recently lapsed under the Trump administration.
No, it's been going on long before that.
I'm
Like
aware.
100.
I'm aware.
We have like
yeah.
120 now. And OPEC, we're not a member of OPEC.
I know.
The problem, America could be setting the market in oil and gas, but we are so involved with OPEC, we let them set the price, and it shouldn't be that way.
OPEC has been slashing production, and they're doing that in preparation that there was going to be another economic recession. It had undercut the United States to a substantial degree, though, which just led to some anger.
But what I'm saying, and what there are a lot of people of my science. I've been in the oil and gas industry for over 25 years, so it's kind of my wheelhouse. I'm not going to pretend to know a lot about everything else, but I do know that. What I'm talking about here is we could be setting the market, but we don't have the refining capabilities, mainly because of liberal policies, EPA and all of that. That is what
kind of.
I mean,
kind of, but also kind of not.
That's not debatable. I mean,
no, it is. It is debatable. It is debatable because if you were to say okay, well, Biden put on restrictions onto oil and natural gas, like in terms of what they have to clean up after themselves, and sure, but then that would ignore that those policies actually will save oil and gas rigs money in the future to a significant degree. You could say and talk about California and why their gas is so high, and then that would be a liberal policy that's causing that. But I would say that generally speaking, no, because like in Washington State, where I live, a lot of it has to do with work being done on the refineries, and also there's issues with the pipelines. There's construction work being done on pipelines that bring oil up here to the refineries. So,
right, but you've got like nationwide 7 laws and stuff and FERC laws that greatly hinder pipeline and infrastructure progress, and that kills your transmission side of it. And again, that's all goes back to EPA and liberal policies, environmental policies. You know what Trump did.
So one of the main policies that changed was there was a higher cost, like per percentage. Like, okay, it was like I can't remember what the amount per barrel was, like 4% or something like that. It's not incredible high, but it basically was just to raise money. So you could say that, but in terms of like no, I would say it's mostly just a global market. And if you look at the global market, we have pretty low oil prices. I don't know. I think the only way that we could get around that is if we were refining dirtier oil and not exporting it. But I don't know that it would be beneficial for us as a country. And I don't know enough about the export-import of oil to speak on it.
Well, the price of oil, going back to 1980 versus today, if you change the value of the dollar between now and then, it's really not that different. But our price to produce it and refine it and move it from the wellhead to the pipeline to the refineries, that's what has gone through the roof because of regulations and permitting and things like that. I mean, and again, I go back to we could be setting the standard for the world. We could be exporting. We could be the number one in all of it if you drop the regulations, because the environmental aspect side of it, if you hamstring our production, all that does is push it overseas to Saudi Arabia and Iran, and they don't give two about the environment.
Right.
I mean,
I don't think it's just I mean I don't think it's necessarily just an environmental thing, because we do authorize a lot of fracking in the United States. We do Joe Biden authorized drilling in the Gulf, and we are producing more oil than at any other point in global history. Like our country's producing more oil. So I'm not sure that it's like a liberal policy thing, because Joe Biden, if
well,
anything, has expanded it.
well, yeah, but if you don't have the refining capacity, it doesn't matter how much you produce. If you're going to export it, you're going to give other countries, they're going to take advantage of that. And then we are in America, we're not seeing any of the benefits. And nobody talks about it, Democrat or Republican, about expanding our refining capacity.
But the regulations are the way they are. I don't want our oil getting into major aquifers. I think that's completely detrimental. And I think at a time where auto manufacturers are planning on going away by 2035, all of them are going to electric vehicles, I don't really see the point of expanding to that degree.
But that's not going to happen. The electric vehicle is not. We're 50 years away from that being viable.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Absolutely.
I think I would bet right now that in the works are major plans from Walmart, Amazon. We've already seen it with Amazon, UPS, FedEx, and we know that UPS and FedEx are already making those plans. But those tractor trailers, those are next. It's 20% the cost. It's 20% the cost.
All those tractor trailers that are running in the wintertime up north, they're not ready. I'm just telling you.
I'm aware that we're not there yet. But you got to think like, okay, well, their battery packs are going to be more expensive. They're going to stick them underneath a big rig, is what they're going to do, and then you're going to charge it while they're in dock. And like you can say like they're not energy efficient in the winter. That's fine. This isn't going to be the final variation.
Right,
like
but
we're not going to use water and lithium, or we're not going to use lithium ion like this in the future. It's going to be something else. It's going to be salt lithium or something to that degree, or
and how's all that? Whatever it is, it's going to be mined by diesel equipment. We are not. We are not at that point. I mean, we're first,
but you got to imagine. No, we're not. We're not at all.
Yes, we are.
The only thing
we're
is
absolutely.
But no, the only thing that we're worried about right now is the cost expenditure of having to put, well, not us, but like these companies are worried about like how much is it going to cost to build a battery that's big enough to put underneath a truck that we can travel with, and right? That's a concern. That's a concern. Right.
Yes, that's a concern.
But you got to think about this. Like, what does Walmart have? How many trucks do they have running? 200,000 plus.
Let the government do it first. I mean, if Walmart.
I'm just saying from like an economical perspective. Like, if Walmart's looking at this, going, sure, we're going to have to cover a lot more overhead, which, by the way, we won't be taxed on, but we'll have to make these big rigs into electric vehicles, right?
And I would have
buy
no
off
problem
electric vehicles. Hold on a second. We'll have to buy off these electric vehicles, but we're going to save hundreds of millions of dollars a year on gas, on diesel. Like that's the calculation that they're taking in. And it's already efficient for Amazon to go out and buy electric vehicles. It's not yet for big rigs. It will be. And when it is, there's going to be a ton of investment, because that overhead year over year is going to save them a ton of money.
Yeah. I mean, I can see it. Like I say, 50, 60 years away, I can see it. But let me tell you, like the wind farms, the wind turbines. I mean, this is a fact. You can look it up. That wind turbine that's standing out there, that one wind turbine, in its lifetime of operations, which they say they last 30 years, but they usually last between 15 and 20, that wind turbine in its lifetime of operation will never offset the carbon footprint it took to build it, erect it, produce it, and maintain it. It will never offset the carbon footprint.
That's not true.
That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true.
Where are you getting that from?
Citation needed.
You look it up. I mean, you can look that up. I mean,
are we looking at wind turbines?
Yep. And that wind turbine, it will always need lubrication, which will be a petroleum.
Yeah, they use synthetic.
Where does that come from?
Not petroleum.
Absolutely.
Right here. I can double check it for you, but this is the first one. Wind turbines can offset their carbon footprint in less than 6 months and then produce emission-free electricity for the rest of their 20 to 30-year lifespan. I'll admit that they usually don't last that long because more efficient ones come into market that it makes sense for them to put up.
That is not correct. I mean,
okay, well, let me find you like
well, prove us wrong.
I'm going to pull up
the one thing, all of that stuff comes from overseas. It's all manufactured overseas. It's shipped over here on ships.
So is oil.
Let's see here.
So is oil.
Well, oil shouldn't be. We should be having our oil right here.
Right, but it's shipped overseas. Earlier. But even then, we would still be shipping our oil overseas. And by the way, we can make them here. We can make them here. The Japanese are just so far ahead of us because we're not trying. Like, we're not investing money into that infrastructure, which we should be.
We are the cleanest oil producer. So why would it? We ought to be sending it everywhere.
It's an oxymoron.
What do you mean the cleanest oil producer?
We produce and drill oil and refine oil cleaner than any other country in the world.
We have fracking oil. Like, that's most of what we produce.
Is gas. Fracking is not oil.
Fracking is both.
For gas. Fracking is for natural gas.
Fracking is both. Fracking is both. It is both oil and it is natural gas.
You need to do a little bit of research.
I can pull it up for you right now. I've studied this extensively, specifically what it does to aquifers, because the shale rock is typically either just above or below major aquifers because the sediment has been washed away. So what remains is the water on top and below of shale rock.
And fracking is done below.
It depends. Typically below, sometimes deep wells, but there's shallow wells.
If the geological surveys have been done right and are accurate, you're not going to get in the aquifer. Are there accidents that happen? Absolutely, but for every accident they learn. I mean,
it's got a regular methane leakage rate about 8%.
Yeah, I've seen studies that show that in various different aquifers, they tested over 900 different substances that were used specifically to lubricate the sand or ceramic beads that are used in fracking. So, and it happens frequently. And it happens frequently because shale rock is so dense that when it cracks, it just travels like glass.
It don't. Do you?
I'm just telling you what it is. Shale rock is incredibly dense.
Right, and you explode a charge that fractures just a small area around the drill string.
Right, similar thing to gas, or similar thing to glass. You fracture it, and it starts cracking. It may not continue to crack, but right, no, they do have it where it's leaked. I mean, have you ever? There's literal footage of like faucets catching on fire from natural gas getting into the aquifer.
Oh, I understand that too. You can drill a water well and have the same thing happen.
Sure, but let's be completely honest about the difference of blowing explosives up in dense, compact rock versus drilling a well. Like, you're talking about significant damage to the aquifer.
Well, I think you've been reading one side of things. That's really not
right. Like when you misquoted that stat on wind turbines.
That's not misquoting the stat.
Well, you did. You said that they raise carbon emissions based on overall usage. That was disproven.
That's not disproven.
I'm just telling you, like,
then give us an alternative source, please.
It doesn't make economic. I'm just telling you, it doesn't make economic sense for us to continue investing in energy that is not going to be used in the vast majority of cars that we're not going to need this ample surplus for. Like, we're going to have more wells producing more oil than we personally can use. So all that's going to happen to that oil is going to get exported. But the goal would be to go to electric and manufacture. You could imagine, like, production increases, profit yield increases. You can imagine the cost that goes down on consumers by using energy, which right now would be about 20%. It would be about 20% of what oil would cost you or less, depending on your market.
What would be 20% less?
No, not 20% less, 20% of. So electricity, typically it costs about 20% of what gas does in a car. I'm rough estimating, but yeah, it's significantly less to run a car on electricity, to run anything on electricity than it is on gas.
Whether it's
fewer carbon emissions,
but the carbon emissions are going to be somewhere else in the production.
See, that's not a concern or critique that you have about fracking, about coal, about anything else that you've endorsed thus far. So why is it somehow the big issue of the day when it comes to renewable energy?
Hey guys, if you are enjoying the show, make sure you hit the like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. And if you want to support the channel, you guys can become a YouTube member on this channel, or preferably join the Patreon in the link tree in the bio. Also in the link tree is my TikTok, Instagram, Twitch, and the OK Hi YouTube, which I post news to on a regular basis. Enjoy the rest of the show. Right, you should be accepting of the fact that it does the one benefit, even if there's only one benefit that you can point to, right? Electric cars, but the benefit is that electric cars are going to cost significantly less. So even just that benefit alone.
But if it's not worth it, if it's not reliable, it's not worth it.
But it is reliable. It is reliable, but you would say that about cell phones. When cell phones came out, they weren't reliable. They weren't as reliable as they are now.
Right. The government didn't step in and tell everybody to get rid of their landline. The government did. Yes, I know, but the government did come in and invest into cell phone infrastructure, right? But it wouldn't make sense to go, oh, well, this cell phone is less effective than a landline, therefore we should stop worrying about building cell phones and just go back to the landline. Yeah, but and that's what I said. They didn't come in and take away our landlines like they're saying. California is going to be rid of all of combustion engines by 2030 or whatever.
They're not
taking them away. It's ceasing construction of them.
Right. They're phasing them out. So they're not manufacturing by 2035, but California is also going to all of their government vehicles being electric. And I think they've already made
And I'm 100% for that. If the government wants to do it and work out all the bugs, but don't kill American auto industry to push an electric vehicle that is not ready for everyone to have.
Yeah, we shouldn't kill the pager industry either.
I don't think that's killing I don't think that's killing the auto industry. They're going to have to make changes. They're going to still construct relatively the same cars. It's going to be a different engine.
Where's all the electric stuff coming from? China. I would not have that much of a problem with it if we were doing everything in America, just like my view on the oil and gas industry in general.
It would be the similar thing. I don't think engines are developed overseas.
I mean, it's all in the name of the environment, yet you're pushing everything over to countries that don't give two shits about the environment.
So I would agree that's a problem, but that's currently the way that we do things right now that you don't seem to have a problem.
And that's terrible. America's losing for it.
Listen, if you're now an environmentalist, the first step would be to getting rid of oil, or at least oil to the capacity that we have it. We're not talking about a situation where it's like, oh, we're making an uncomfortable transition, therefore, for no reason. We're talking about a situation where we're talking about the superheating of the planet. We're talking about, by the end of the century, 16 feet of ocean level rise. We're talking about 500 million climate refugees.
I don't believe that.
Okay, I'll prove it to you. I'll prove it to you right now. Okay.
They've been saying that since the 60s.
Do you know how rice is grown?
Yeah, in rice paddies.
Awesome. Do you know what rice paddies have a really finicky type of climate? Are you aware of that?
Right.
Right. Too much water, they drown. Too little water, they can't operate the rice paddy. And you also cannot make rice in an indoor farm.
Okay.
You can't do it. Okay. Rice provides 3.5 billion people globally with 500 calories a day. It is one of the staples of most of the human diet. And if that goes away, trouble. Lots of people starving, because you have ocean level rise just a few feet, right? Where these paddies are getting flooded beyond belief, crop dies out, right? So you can already see, just this one thing, just rice paddies alone, you're talking about 3.5 million people being 500 calories less a day. And we don't know where we're going to get the rest of it from.
So because one area may not be suitable anymore, does that mean another area hasn't become suitable?
No,
because it's happened with every crop.
No, because we're talking about two things. We're talking about saltwater sea level rise, and we're talking about freshwater flooding. We're talking about an unstable crop for 3.5 billion people.
Right.
So that's the concern.
So But you can't show me anywhere on natural land that the sea level has risen that much over the same period of time that you're saying.
Because it's an acceleration, right? So if you go and you look through heat records, every single year now we're breaking more heat records. Every single year versus the previous year, we're breaking more heat records. And that's accelerating at a rapid rate. And there's actually a ton of different graphics that you can go and watch, like how much it's heated up.
So you're saying it's hotter now than it ever has been, and since we've recorded.
On average, it is hotter than it has been now than in recorded history per year over year.
And consistently, every summer has set the record year over year in the last decade.
Okay, and that's 10 years, and we've recorded this data for a microcosm in time
since the 1870s.
Right, and you can take core samples and see that the Earth has changed a lot more than it has in this past 10 years. I'm just not one that buys into that. I don't think what we're doing on this planet is causing.
Oh, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. And in fact, I'm going to show you this really quick. It absolutely is. So the whole point that we're having here is that carbon, okay, I'll pull up the thing for you. The whole point that we're having here is that carbon causes the UV rays coming into the atmosphere to not leave and to heat it up. So if we go to here, parts per million CO2 graph, and I think it's over 800K years. This just goes up to 2016, and the average parts per million now is about 440 or something. So this right here, it's like, oh wow, well, it's going up. This right here that you see, if you guys see it over here, that big long stretch right there, okay? That stretch right there, that stretch is what's happened in the last 100 years. This stretch is over the last 800,000 years. And this is the parts per million that we've reached. And on top of that, we now have mass agriculture crops for cattle. And methane produces and traps 25 times the heat. There's also other ones that trap even more, and those are greenhouse gases. So it's this carbon's the problem, but we also have greenhouse gases, and you end up with acceleration, right? If you the heat goes up and then it comes down, it doesn't come down to the same level it was. It comes down to a lesser level, and then the heat goes up and then it comes down to a less level. You can sort of think about it like that. But this is over the last 800.
Well, that's not. I mean, I know the carbon's been higher in 800,000 years, so we are not at the highest point in history.
In history, no, but it's certainly in the highest. We have the most parts per million in the atmosphere in over 4.5 million years.
I mean, it's just. I'm skeptical that anybody can. I mean, the world, the universe. I mean, it's self-cleaning. It's
about to clean us off the planet and solve the problem.
I don't believe that. I don't think that. I don't think it is.
Well, it's gotta.
I mean, I'm old enough to remember in the 60s and 70s when all this started, and it was going to be. We were going to freeze. Now we're going to be hot, and we're going to freeze. Now we're going to be hot again. So I don't.
Who the f said that?
Well, we can Al Gore for one, and then back in the 70s, people in Carter's administration were talking about I forget the term they called it back then, but it's been constant,
right? We were,
and every 20 years they say the world's going to come to an end.
No, they don't.
It never does.
No, they don't. I just want to point out that right now we have computer modeling. We didn't have computer modeling in the 70s, 80s. We barely had any in the 90s. In the 2000s is when it started, and it became crystal clear. And what we're experiencing, sure, it may have come later than was initially thought, but the research wasn't there yet. The research is overwhelmingly conclusive. There was approximately 88,000 studies looking into climate change. Less than 80 of them, I think it's less than 100. It's like less than 80 or 100. Contradict that. Like 88,000 studies. So it's conclusive.
Well, I mean, I guess that's up for to me. It's not, but
So one of the things that you're going to start experiencing, you've noticed this already. I don't know why, because I live in Seattle, and when I was a kid, I don't remember the crazy summers that we have here. And it's weird to me that people that are older than me don't remember that. But when I was a kid in Seattle, we would have like 75 was a warm day. If it touched 80, it was hot. If it hit 80, 85 was crazy hot. The hottest day that I ever experienced, I was in elementary school, was 96 degrees. And it beat the record by like 4 degrees. And the record for 92 hadn't happened in like 2 decades. We hit 90 for almost every single summer now. We hit 97, 98 on a regular. Like I think one summer, probably about 6, 7, 8 years ago, we had, I don't know, a stretch of 2 weeks of 95-degree weather. And we didn't have rain for 75 days. That never happened when I was a kid. It just didn't happen. Throughout my entire childhood, it didn't happen. We didn't even have air conditioning because you never needed it.
I get it, but in the big scheme of things, who's to say 100 years from now, it's not going to be swung the other direction? And that's what because we had the Dust Bowls back in the 30s and 40s, and it's always, climate always changes. I don't think we're on this disastrous.
I mean, what more evidence do you need? Every year we're breaking 15,000 heat records. The computer modeling that we were given 2 decades ago, spot on.
And Dust Bowl wasn't a climate thing. It had to
I
do
actually
with
used to.
machinery.
Here's a fun fact. I actually.
The Dust Bowl was
he's
climate
talking about
because there wasn't any rain and there was excessive wind, and dirt and wind creates dust.
Cool
That's what the Dust Bowl was. Was it machinery?
No, that had to do with mass agriculture and doing away with soil.
They were farming with freaking horses.
We had periods of severe soil erosion due to factory farming that undid a lot of what was there.
Funny story. I actually used to hunt on this farmer's property that lived through the Dust Bowl. He died a few years ago. He's like in his almost 90, but he was a kid when the Dust Bowl. Yeah.
In Oklahoma, Kansas.
I think it was in Oklahoma. That's why he moved to what ended up being Yakima. Well, actually, what was Yakima?
I mean, my point is the climate has always changed, and
it has changed, but it's changing at an accelerating pace. When we're talking about this climate change right now, you're talking about hundreds. You're talking about 100,000, 200,000 years. That's the time frame. You're not talking about 100 years. I mean, if what you were saying was true, maybe we'd have a handful of bad summers, but no, every single year is breaking the record. And just to point out what I find most interesting, there's this piece that was written in the New York Times a while ago. It's called The Decade We Almost Stopped Climate Change. And it was written in 2018, and it was basically how conservatives, when the idea of climate change first emerged, were not resistant to it at all. But they wrote this the author in here is Nathan Rich, wrote this really, really great sort of summation about what we're facing. Anyways, he basically gives a summation of what happens if we hit 4%. Right here. Okay. It's like in the first page. If by some miracle we are able to limit warming to 2 degrees, we will only have to negotiate the extinction of the world's tropical reefs, sea level rise of several meters, and the abandonment of the Persian Gulf. The climate scientist James Hansen has called 2-degree warming, quote, a prescription for long-term disaster. Long-term disaster is now the best case scenario. 3-degree warming, this is in Celsius, is a prescription for short-term disaster. Forests in the Arctic and the loss of most coastal cities. Robert Watson, a former director of the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has argued that 3-degree warming is the realistic minimum. 4 degrees, Europe in permanent drought, vast areas of China, India, and Bangladesh claimed by desert, Polynesia swallowed by the sea, and the Colorado River thinned to a trickle. The American Southwest largely uninhabitable. The prospect of 5-degree warming has prompted some of the world's leading climate scientists to warn of the end of human civilization, which I think is probably true. That's about 12 degrees, something like that. Like we're not with like just a small thing. We're talking about the inability to cultivate crops. We're talking about not really drinking water, but water to put on crops. We're talking about heat so exhaustive that crops produce less, which we've already seen throughout the United States. Colorado River Basin, they have to like draw a lottery over who's gonna grow crops. Like it's bad. Red tide in Florida. So we should probably go ahead and make that move.
Well, okay. Like I say, I'm not sure if I buy into all that because they're
you don't have anything to reference.
I mean, I'm telling you, this is just overwhelming evidence.
I'm not sitting in front of my computer right now, but there are opposing viewpoints. I mean, I know that.
It's really not. 97% of climate scientists agree.
Well,
like I said, 88 studies out of 88,000.
Who funded those studies?
The 88,000 are funded predominantly by tax dollars, through research institutions that draw off grants or other various ones that do it. There I go. What? Who funded the 88 studies? Ask that question.
Well, like I say, what can you really believe? Well, I mean, I'm not saying there's no validity to. I'm not saying there's no validity to any of it. I'm just saying
the computer modeling has been right. The computer modeling has been right. Look at what side's been right. Has the climate stayed the same? No, it's gotten hotter. Right? Look at the storms. Like, the storms that they're facing in Florida, the storms, like the increase in tornadoes at random times of the year, in random parts of the year, in random places in the Northeast, tornadoes in Washington State. This is caused
snowstorms in Texas.
Right. Ice storms in Texas. It's caused predominantly by climate change. Like, you have a shrinking of the polar vortexes, and as a result, storm systems slow down. That's why you end up with these long droughts that go on for months and months and months. This is why it's getting worse in Texas. There's getting worse snowstorms, is because the polar vortexes are slowing down and pummeling the areas they're over.
I'm in Texas. I mean, I totally understand Texas weather, and it is not. I mean, we had a 100-year storm with the ice storm a few years back, but you have those. I mean, that's in recorded history. I'm not saying there's no validity to what you're saying. I just don't think we're on that path to impending doom that you do. I think it will turn around on its own. I mean,
how? How?
Because I just think that's what the world does.
What is supposed to change? We continue to put carbon emissions in the atmosphere. We continue to put greenhouse gases. It's not like it's leaving the atmosphere. We're cutting down the Amazon rainforest at a staggering and shockingly astounding rate.
Well, and if they're not replenishing it, I agree. That's a problem.
There's no way to replenish those trees. Are hundreds of years old. They're huge.
Well, I mean,
how are you pulling that? But the question is, how are you pulling the carbon out of the atmosphere?
A planet that's been here for God knows how long.
It'll be here. It'll be here. We won't.
Right.
We won't.
Have you seen Interstellar?
No, I have not.
You should watch it, because the first part of the film is talking distinctively about what we're facing. And
is it a movie or on Netflix, or what's it on?
What did I watch? Did I watch it on Prime the other day?
But it's a movie. It's not a series.
Maybe it was Max. I can't remember. Was it on Max? Was it on Prime? It's a movie. It's a long movie, but it's a good movie. It's a very good movie.
What's it called?
It's called Interstellar.
Yeah, I'll watch that. No, I mean, I agree. There is definitely need for concern. I mean, I don't disagree with you there. I personally don't buy into the catastrophe side of it, that we're headed if we don't make all these drastic changes.
I want you to watch, because the heat wave that we're facing right now is going to stick around. It's going to stick around. And you watch. The heat wave that we're facing is very predictable. It's going to stick around. We see it every year, and we're going to break a ton of heat records. Anyway, I appreciate you coming in. I'm going to pee and let Jaden take this one, because I'm going to pee.
All right. Good conversation. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Take care, man.
Take care.